Hello, everybody. Glad to be here today. My name is Brenden McEneaney, so I'm the Pacific Regional Director for the U.S. Green Building Council, our office here in San Francisco. Most of you probably know USGBC through the LEED rating system, and so I'll be talking about a new one of our programs called PEER today. I should say first, as a caveat, I have two substantial disadvantages. One is that I'd be willing to bet I know the least about microgrids and power distribution systems of anybody in this room here today. The lead of this program actually is in DC. We're doing a nationwide launch of this program tomorrow. So we were going to have her come out here, but we figured it would make more sense for me to take Bart rather than have her take a plane for the presentation. So in some ways, my goal is to just give you the overview, and hopefully you have questions so I can loop her in. And next time she's in California, I'd love to have her come back and make a presentation for you guys. The second is that my baby daughter is sick and forgot how to sleep. So this is the second day in a row that I've been up since 2:30, and I'm only mostly convinced that you guys are not figments of my imagination right now. So I will try to do my best. So the PEER system that we have acquired and now improved upon is for power distribution systems. We basically have looked at this program along with a series of other programs that parallel what we did with LEED. So putting kind of a standards framework around established industry best practice, but in segments that we think of as adjacent to buildings. So if buildings are using LEED, power distribution systems are using PEER, we have a sites rating system for public landscapes, and so on and so on. So PEER is one that involves infrastructure that touches buildings, but is sort of a separate set of criteria, as you'll see. So a lot of this is driven by the need to have kind of a standardized language globally around what these best practices are and how to put metrics to them to communicate what we should be expecting from certain systems. The market transformation here is going to follow a similar sort of pathway that we used with LEED. And this is really a global system. So we want to ensure reliable and resilient power systems for everybody. It looks a little different in the US than it might look like in developing markets. But as you'll see, the whole intent is to put that same framework and the same language around how do we assess the effectiveness of these systems. So one of the goals as far as developing this program, you may recognize this picture from this iconic image from after Superstorm Sandy. The Goldman Sachs building and the surrounding areas was one of the only ones with power after the storm. Having a resilient power distribution system is one of the core objectives of developing this program, and making sure that there's equitable access to that, making sure that power in critical facilities can stay on in the event of disruption, climate related or otherwise. Another core part of what we do in general, but certainly with PEER, is looking at the reduction of environmental impacts, carbon-related impacts, air quality impacts. So not just the downtime and resilience component, but actual general environmental goals as well. Equitable access is another kind of set of criteria that we're looking at. So customer engagement and providing different services and options, data security to customers wherever they are around the world. And on that engagement side, you'll see as we look at how the project boundaries are defined is really engaging with the customers and the participants in how they're purchasing power, how they have access to energy data for benchmarking, and so on. In the modern grid infrastructure, with the advent of Internet of Things, with smart buildings, with big data analytics, we're trying to put, again, the standards and the language and the metrics around what do we expect from the grid going forward. We've seen a lot of examples through the EPIC grant, through the Open project and others where we're envisioning what that looks like locally here. And this, despite the intricacies at each project site, and there's unique local, political, market, cultural, demographic conditions, we do think that there is a standard set of measures that we're looking for to establish for the grid of the future. So when we think of what contributed to the success of LEED, which certifies 2.3 million square feet of buildings per day, it's really kind of these three big buckets. Is first, have this rating system. So we're talking about a global set of goals implemented at the project level, a consistent language based on metrics and data that every project can aspire to, even if the local conditions are different. So setting that language is kind of the first piece. But the second one is building this community of practitioners. So that happened through the LEED rating system with LEED accredited professionals, but also with the local chapter network that we have here in California throughout the country. We're looking to do the same thing with energy managers, consultants, utility operators, electricians, to build a community of practitioners around sustainable power distribution systems. And then lastly, trying to use these best practice ideas translated into kind of a rating system as a way to foster better public policy outcomes. So can this be the framework for local governments and state governments to look at adopting the best practice into policy? So what is peer and what does this look like? These are sort of the target market segments we've been looking at. So overlaps a lot with projects that might be doing LEED, but as you can see, there's sort of a distinct subset here. First, in the critical infrastructure realm. So this is where the resilience components really come into play with hospitals, airports, data centers. Beyond that, looking at privately owned microgrids. So where beyond the downtime and resilience, there may be other sustainability goals, customer engagement issues, but sort of contained within a private system. And then looking further, it's downtown community-based microgrids that combine a whole series of these different objectives, utility participation, electricity co-ops. So this is kind of the set of where we see the core audience for this program to be. So in terms of defining the project site, so this is kind of the schematic to look at. The green sort of interior band is really what we're looking at, the definition. It's the power distribution, but you can imagine those internal and external boundaries as sort of porous. So there's some component that looks at upstream and sourcing of the power and the environmental attributes of where the generation is coming from, but there's also attributes that look downstream at the customer engagement, energy benchmarking, participation by people on the load side. But really the bulk of the rating system is looking at that inner kind of green circle of the distribution, substation, backup generator, and those pieces of the equipment. We're already on to version 2.0. That's what this launch is going to be tomorrow. So actually, we've renamed some of these categories. The first two are the same, but these are sort of the 4 sections of the rating system and where there are a set of credits and points assigned to them. So reliability and resiliency and energy efficiency and environment, those are staying the same. But then operational effectiveness has translated more into operations management and safety. And safety is a really important component of this. It's about the training, the quality control, sort of the behind the scenes stuff on the infrastructure itself. The customer contribution, we've renamed that to grid services. So it is a lot of the customer facing stuff, the energy benchmarking, but it's also cybersecurity, as has been mentioned before, demand management, energy efficiency programs that are offered. So there's a whole set of things that are kind of looking more at that customer side. So we've renamed that grid services to sort of think or capture that more appropriately. For any of you who are familiar with LEED, it's a similar type of system. There are a few must-do prerequisite components, and then there are 31 credits, all with varying amounts of points. And we've established these thresholds to distinguish between kind of the minimum certification at 40 points going up to platinum, very similar to LEED with 80+ points. This is going to be too small for you to read, but you're going to get these slides. So this is the checklist for the rating system, so you get a better idea of what the specific measures are that go into the peer rating system. And then there are the 4 main sections: reliability, resiliency, energy efficiency, environment, operations management and safety, and grid services. And then we also create these opportunities for innovation, exemplary performance, and then specific regional priorities. So again, very parallel to LEED, but recognizing that there's ways to go above and beyond the system, and that there's also locally relevant factors that each project is going to find and pursue that make sense to reward. And that's all I have for today. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
My questions are more on who is this for and has anybody done it?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of which ones are not confidential, or what can I say? So the launch, that'll come out tomorrow, and I'll be able to send out the link with the full list of projects that have gone through this, but it ranges from projects in Delhi to projects in a small town in Kentucky. It's from a suburb of Chicago to a college campus in Texas. So it's a really wide mix. What I've been told is sort of the way to think about the scale is an entire utility grid system could do this program, or at minimum 2 buildings that are individually metered and had some sort of infrastructure to serve them as a local microgrid. So it really does span the range of that. There's municipal utilities, healthcare as well, and it is kind of a wide range, which in a way makes it tough to communicate about, because what's going to make sense for those 2 homes on a local microgrid is way different than what might be for an entire utility system. But yeah, we'll definitely send out the list of projects that have already done this. Yeah.
Did you, or you just brought up the point that this is at a minimum for 2 buildings that would be on separate meters. So what would you say about campus-style microgrids, where there would be one utility interconnection, yet several buildings served for one customer?
Let me see if I can go back to the kind of the project, there we go, project boundary. So I think it would sort of it would fit within the scope here, but maybe the question is, where does that internal boundary of customers lie? And that's why the schematic is more helpful than kind of an actual map, because it's going to look different in each situation. I think you could still apply, if you go through the system though, you look at what's on grid services, which is really more of that customer engagement, and that might be individual buildings on campus, right? But you have, do you offer financial incentives? Is there access to energy usage data? Do you have a demand response program? So I think there are still ways to address those issues, even if the customer and the entity with microgrid end up being essentially the same group, if I think that's what your question is. Yeah.